Hi, my name is Mercedes Smith, and today I will be doing my research analysis paper on The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. So I've been waiting to write this paper all term long ever since we read it. I found this story to be really interesting, and it was my favorite one we read so far. And as I was able to analyze it deeper, I just found a lot more hidden meanings the author put in there, and we could see how her life was incorporated into the story. And overall, I just think there's a lot that plays into societies and traditions and how they affect humans. So quickly starting with Shirley Jackson, she published this paper 2 years after World War II was declared over. And the newspaper company that published this received a lot of feedback and criticism and backlash about this paper, but it was also the most requested paper they had ever had. Shirley Jackson's political views can be seen throughout this. Even though I did not write my paper on this, they're pretty obvious. It was written during the time of World War II, so obviously that had a lot of influence on what she would write and what her political views would be, and she would share it with the world. So I found that to be really interesting. And just a recap on what the lottery is a future utopian society where people monthly go draw out of a box to see if they would be stoned to death. It's just a chance of luck. They just pull it out of the box, and we really have no reason why they do it. At one part in the story, it is said that they do it because they mention some sort of crops and how they wouldn't have anything to eat if they didn't stone people to death. Maybe it's just the proportions and the rations and how much they can feed to each person, but overall that's what the story is about. So Tessie Hutchinson ends up ultimately drawing the paper with a dot at the end, and then it quickly ends with her family, including her younger kids, and the whole community just stoning her to death, and her saying how unfair it is and how gruesome and horrible it is, and I would have to agree in that situation. But there's a lot of deeper meaning in the story, so let's jump into it. So getting started with the first paragraph, I just introduced the story, pretty much what I just told you guys, and I added a lot of sentences that pretty much play on my introducing of tradition in societies in the lottery. I said, in society, traditions are often held to the utmost high standard. They are built into societies and often seen as a way of respect and idolization, but can also be hard to challenge the present ways of thinking. So that was pretty much me introducing what my thesis was kind of going to be about. It wasn't stating my thesis, but I did include traditions and societies and how they are seen as a way of respect. So my thesis is, in Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, the traditions of the town can be identified as an idolized way of thinking. Through the negative consequences of keeping the tradition, the willingness of the individuals to sacrifice family members, and the urge to keep the ritual going. So overall, this paper, I analyzed tradition and how it is seen in the lottery and how it is analyzed and portrayed. So that's pretty much what my paper focused. So starting off with the first paragraph and the first point in my thesis, I say, the negative consequences of keeping the tradition in the lottery affects the people in the society and the ability to act on their own freedom of thinking. So what my idea was when I was playing on this is pretty much that human violence is permitted and accepted rather than human rights. And that just shows the innocence of people and how innocent people are getting killed, and that there's no real reason stated as to why the tradition is kept going. I also said the negative consequence can be found all throughout the story, from the killing of innocent people to the ability of keeping an unnecessary tradition alive. And then in one of my sources I quoted, it said, there are potentially negative implications for many groups when traditional values trample on human rights, but they are not always the same. Traditional values need not be at odds with human rights. Indeed, they may even bolster them. So I put this quote in because I really liked how it's the last sentence that said, traditional values need not be at odds with human rights. Indeed, they may even bolster them. So that was really significant in the story because instead of increasing the human rights in the story, they actually decreased them and upheld human violence as more important. Even though we can't really judge because we don't know the reason why, just basing it off of our own personal morals, we can see that it's not okay and that human rights should be held at a higher standard than a box. I lastly ended the paragraph with, the idolized way the people respect the tradition and keeping it alive negatively impacts their ways of choice and thinking, leading to an infringement of rights and the safety of citizens. So just backing up my point, I pretty much said that the infringement of rights and the safety of the citizens just counteracts with how they're keeping the tradition alive and how it's not really necessary, and it's just an idolized way of thinking and a habit that they are in. Going on to my second paragraph, I start with, The willingness the people have to sacrifice anyone and anything other than themselves, including their own family members, shows how idolized the upkeep of the tradition is. So pretty much my play on this part of my thesis was everyone was willing to defend themselves but not defend any of their family members, and that just shows pretty much how messed up the lottery is. At one point we can see when Tessie first draws it, there's a lot of people just telling her to be quiet. It says, "You didn't give him time enough to take any paper he wanted. I saw you, it wasn't fair." And then someone replies, "Be a good sport, Tessie," or "All of us took the same chance." So that was just kind of weird, thinking that if you were seeing your friend get killed or your own mother, you would be arguing it. But we don't see that at all, actually. And towards the end, when she's actually getting stoned to death, it notes that her little boy picks it up and kills her. Well, helps kill her. So I found this to be really weird. So I finished off this paragraph with, "Some traditions can be beneficial to society, but in this sense it has every negative and idolized impact on the people in this story. The willingness of sacrificing everyone but themselves in the story shows the selfishness and human violence capable in order to keep the tradition going." In paragraph 3, I say, "The urge to keep the ritual going in the lottery supports the worshipping of the practice and how it affects the way people think. Through years of pain, agony, and no change, the lottery stays the same." And in this part, I quoted the conversation where one of the elderly men, someone tells him that some of the districts are getting rid of the lottery, and he instantly chastises them and says that's a horrible idea and they're going to regret it. So we do understand that there could be a possibility that the lottery is essential, but it's such a worship practice. Everyone gets excited for it, everyone talks about it and acts like it's no big deal. So I found that to be very interesting. This is a part where I related it to Shirley Jackson's life. I said, "Throughout the story there are many references to World War II, such as people blindly following rules, human violence, and the controlling of the people and their thinking." So I think Shirley Jackson really plays on this idea of how World War II was seen as kind of like people being controlled, and I think she wanted to interpret this into the story. So finishing off in my last paragraph, I said, "In Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, the idolized ways of thinking can be recognized multiple times throughout the story, through negative consequences, keeping the tradition, the ability to sacrifice innocent people, and the desire to keep the harmful tradition going. Jackson combines real-life events and delusional dystopias to create an intriguing story." So overall, my analysis on The Lottery by Shirley Jackson is that traditions can really affect the people and the way they think. If programmed into their brain, they will do anything not to fight against it and to change it, even if it's impacting basic human rights. And Shirley Jackson was able to play with this idea and base it on real-world events, especially during her time during World War II. So thank you guys for watching.